All right, you guys, what's going on? Is Blaise here at the Blue Chip Athletic Club podcast. I'm stoked to have on Pat Darby. Came highly regarded from some of my business coaches for his expertise in the financial, I call space, especially small business owners in the health and wellness space as well. Making sure that people are kind of optimizing their books ability to kind of learn. So I'm excited to have you on. Hopefully, I can take something away, learn and grow myself, and we'll get into that here in a second. I'll introduce you here in a bit, but just want to make a quick plug. All of our sponsors will be in the show notes here. First Form, Log 10 for the best pilot logbook that we got, Sweet Perfections protein cookies. Find all their stuff in there. Really excited to continue to work with those guys. And then we've got some programs rolling out here shortly. We're going to be doing, I think, some sort of a summer shred style of program that'll get you guys ready. Probably will be dropping in April or May. And then we're doing Squat the Plane now, which, Pat, I don't know if you're a fan of doing squats at all, but the aircraft that I fly in the Coast Guard is 67,241 pounds. So the way to do it is you divide that by your body weight, and that's how many reps you owe for the month of January. So if you're interested in getting a sweet flight suit patch, oh yeah, I got one right here. Getting one of these guys for squatting the plane, what I'll do is I'll send it over to you, and you'll be able to complete the challenge. But without further ado, introduce yourself, man. Give me an origin story. Tell me a little bit about you and what kind of led you to where you are today.
Awesome. Yeah. Pat Darby, the accounting firm I have is Sin City CFO. We do tax advisory for small businesses. Most of those businesses are in the online health space. We also work with like online content creators, things like that. I also have a wealth management company that can help people once we've done all the work to lower their taxes and help them improve their net profits. Then we have a wealth management firm to help them invest that money. That's Darby Wealth Planning. And the accounting firm is Sin City CFO. We're located here in Las Vegas. Came out here. I was living in Jersey. That's one of the higher tax states. So
where were you in Jersey?
I had to relocate myself in the business to. I grew up in Philly, so I was living in Hoboken for about 15 years.
Okay.
It's right on the Hudson River
area, so I figured I'd ask.
Oh yeah. That's I think that's like on the way down the shore, right?
Yeah. That's how I know you're from there, man, because you're calling it on the way down the shore. You call them Bennies too, when people come in there and they're not from the area. Yeah.
That's awesome. But yeah, so I'll take your lead, but we do everything from tax strategy, light CFO work, depth CFO work for some clients if they're a little bit bigger company. But the main thing that I think we do pretty well that a lot of accounting firms don't do is the advisory and the proactive tax strategy. And that's not really a knock on a lot of accounting firms. They just don't have that as their service model. But yet the misconception in the industry is that when you buy a tax preparation service, that proactive strategy is included. And usually it's not. Kind of like, I don't know, like in a restaurant, like you buy dinner and assume drinks and apps are included. So
yeah, tell me a little bit about the difference between those things. Like, say I'm somebody who just got juiced up about starting a business up, and I'm about to hit my first year of having to figure out the whole tax equation. I feel like it's super daunting for somebody, myself even included, a number of years ago, where I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to navigate this. As somebody who's been a W-2 government employee with the military, where I could do my own taxes on TurboTax before I launched this, and it was like, oh yeah, dude, the all of it's super standard. I almost can upload this form and I'll be done in 10 minutes, and I'm getting a return of a couple $1,000. I'm like, sick, now I can buy some more beer or whatever I was doing back when I first did it. But yeah, tell me about, like, hey, somebody's new, maybe they're not super familiar with like how to navigate that, like how that tax stuff is broken down, and some common pitfalls maybe that you see with people in their first couple years of business where they're kind of leaving some potential on the table.
Sure. So the best way to look at it is like when you file taxes, you're really just recording history. You're looking back through the rearview mirror, like what happened. And that's similar with bookkeeping too. You're just recording history, like what happened in the last month or year from a person's business. And so those are the services that most people are aware of and pay for. And then more on the strategy side, you're looking out the front windshield and forecasting like where you're going, where your company's projecting in both profit, and then what that's going to mean for tax liability. So that way, like, because we're recording this in January, April is when people know, like, okay, taxes are due, but I can extend it. There's an extension on paperwork. There's no such thing as an extension on payments. So that messes people up because they're like, oh, good, I'll have my accountant extend me till October. I'll figure it all out then. But April 15th, the penalties and interest start running. And so when you pay in September or in October, you're already getting hit with late fees. So I would imagine, so for your listeners, if they're like new in business, especially if it's their first year, a couple things really sneak up on them. And it's like the silent killer for a business owner is self-employment taxes. Because like similar to what you're referring to, when you're a W-2, all the self-employment taxes of Social Security, Medicare, that's taken out of your wages for you. Half is paid by your company, and the other half is just being debited from you, and you never see it, and it's all done. When you're a business owner, that portion's not done for you. Really, no withholding is done for you. So federal and state, people really know about, like people know their federal brackets, things like that. But the self-employment one doesn't get as much publicity. And because it starts on $1, like our tax system, they call like progressive tax systems. As you make more money, percentage that you pay on that money increases, but it doesn't go all the way down to the first dollar. You're only going to get stepped up on the next dollar. So it doesn't get that expensive on your federal side as you start approaching like $80,000, $90,000 of net profit. But that entire amount of net profit got hit at 15% for self-employment. And so that's what I see really shocking people is like their first year, maybe there's only like 5,000 or 6,000 in federal taxes due, especially because of some of the loopholes and things like that and strategies that we gained in the first Trump administration's tax code. But that does not help them with the self-employment taxes. So that can be a real shocker. I remember a few years ago, I had a young woman working with us. I think her net profit was around 90. I think her federal was only like $6,000, but the self-employment was over 10. And so that was what really, she was not expecting that one at all. And obviously it was like more than double what the first one. So the self-employment is the most punitive one for the first year business owner. And then to answer your second question, like what someone could do, the best thing I would recommend to any business owner is have a bank account and credit card or debit card that's exclusively used for the business. It doesn't cost you anything. Like if you use Chase, Wells Fargo, all the big guys, even if you're not yet an LLC or like any sort of business entity, go get a new account, even if it's in your own name and your own social, and put 100% of your business operations in it. Because the best tax strategy you can do in the beginning is just not forgetting the legitimate things you spent money on. Because you might go out and fly to see a client or take them out to dinner, doing all the things like to build your business, and then forget about, especially because we're in January, if you're filing in 2027 on this year, it's very easy to forget like a hotel stay in February or something like that. Sure. So having all of it in one place, simple, free bookkeeping is going to be the best tax strategy you can do for like being organized essentially.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I feel like I got that advice early on that was definitely helpful because you say it yourself, like even if you have a bookkeeping thing, like you'll definitely forget. Like there's no way that you're going to remember all the stuff that you did throughout the year. And like, especially you want to talk about somebody in the health space too, like all those other things that sneak up on you as well. Hey, you bought maybe you're an in-person studio and you bought a new piece of equipment, and like, if you didn't have that on that other card and that's going to be there at your place of business or whatever, then is that going to be helpful? For me personally, like paying for additional certification or flying out to an event or a race or whatever those things are, like those things start to add up. And then, if you're not using that tax advantage, I had a mentor of mine once tell me, it's like, there's two ways you can get rich in this world. One way is you make more money which is tough. And the second way is to pay less in taxes. So like if you're finding a way to do both things at the same time, you're kind of building the margin from both directions. You're able to kind of help improve your status in that way, and then be able to kind of move the needle. But if you're totally neglecting half of the equation by not helping out yourself out in the tax advantage, like call section, which I'm sure comes into like your forecasting and bookkeeping, then you're kind of missing out on the part as you're starting to grow the business and thinking that's the only way to kind of help retain some of that wealth, right?
Yeah, I mean, building wealth tax efficiently is really the name of the game, in my opinion. But also, I think wealth building through being a business owner is much easier, like because there's so many levers you can pull. Whereas there's really not a lot of levers you can pull if you're a regular W-2 employee from a tax perspective. There's maybe a handful of strategies if you're a W-2 employee. Whereas if you're a business owner, I mean, there's literally hundreds of strategies you could implement. Obviously, they're not all going to be applicable to everybody. The downside to that is you have to play the game, because then you have to do the things like, for example, like I know social media makes it very popular, so you have to like do it right. But if you're traveling, quote unquote, personally, there's a lot of ways to turn that into a business trip. Or conversely, the better way to say it is your business trips could be fun. Like, but just play the game. Like if you're going to fly to like Miami, for example, then have a Friday meeting and a Monday meeting set. Then the IRS doesn't care what you do on Saturday and Sunday. That whole weekend's a write-off. But if you know how to play that game and you're a business owner, you just turn that quote unquote weekend getaway into 2 business meetings and a full write-off.
Right. Yeah. Super key, right?
So
like you're just missing out on
those opportunities. Right. Those aren't available to regular W-2 employees. Like they can't just go to Miami and try to write it off. But yeah, I totally agree with you. If you're overpaying your taxes, either you don't have any strategies at all, or again, like if you're just a W-2 that makes a ton of money, there's not a lot you can do other than just pay the tax. There's real estate and oil and gas are like the 2 big ones for those. But the challenge is sometimes those are hard for people to find the right project, and they do it for the taxes and not the investment. And then they end up with a loss on the investment side.
Yeah. So talk to me about that too. Like, let's say, hey, you're that person who started their business a year ago. You're rolling into this first tax season. Maybe you don't have like an LLC or an S-Corp or any of those things kind of laid out. And to be completely honest with you, I don't even know a lot about like the S-Corp like frame. And I'm sure that we could end up going on a tangent for probably an hour just talking about some of the advantages of doing some of those things. But talk to me about like, hey, if you're starting this thing off, like what are some of the biggest bang for your buck style of things you could do? Maybe it is starting an LLC. Maybe it's, you talk through having the cards and the separate accounts so that you're able to kind of have that bookkeeping thing. Or, maybe it's something else completely that, you don't hear on social media from whatever your pages are feeding you, or from a tax person. And then I guess in conjunction with that, talk to me about how like having somebody, whether they're like a coach like you or somebody else in this space, can be super helpful in what you've seen from somebody who came in without your help. And then after the fact, like what that kind of delta did. Because I've worked with a tax guy previously in California. And, when I was out there, like I went into his office and, let's say, for example, we paid him $1,000 and paid him $1,000. We figured out all these different things. And instead of me getting a return of, $5,000, I got a return of like $10,000 or whatever the difference becomes. And it's like, okay, well, why would I not pay this guy $1,000 when my net benefit is going to be $4,000 like in my pocket? It makes a huge difference. So, I know I asked like 4 questions in there, but tell me a little bit about some of those strategies that really can get people off the ground, and then the benefit of having you guys or people like you that can help kind of forecast and then also kind of change the bottom dollar. Because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to make more money and do less work. That's kind of like the name of the game. We all want to get paid more to do less, right?
Yeah. That's we try to make that our value proposition as well. Like, one, we're going to save you taxes, and two, we want to be like your financial back office and save you time. Like, let you be the CEO and run the business and grow the business, and we're taking care of the back office and proactively bringing you strategies. But to get to your first question, which great timing, because I actually literally last night did my podcast episode all about why you should be an S-Corp. And so to take a step back, you do not need an LLC. Like, social media and probably like some scammy lawyer firms, but like everyone is promoting get an LLC. You don't, from a tax perspective, you don't need it. Like, the little kid on the stand on like the corner with a lemonade stand, he is filling out the same tax return as a business owner, like an online coach with an LLC. If it's just a one member LLC, they're called disregarded entities. They fill out form Schedule C, the IRS form. So the IRS doesn't care if you're an LLC or not. That does not reduce your tax strategy options. That's a big misconception out there. People are like, oh, I can't really write things off until I get an LLC. In that stage of the game, the LLC is just a legal strategy. And so, to disclaimer to your audience, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but there's asset protection in the LLC. There's not tax strategy in the LLC.
Yeah.
So if you're new in the business and money's tight and you would rather allocate those funds towards business development or hiring your first team member, putting off the LLC does not hurt you there. Where you need the LLC is when you're getting closer to potentially being an S corporation. So where it starts to make sense with an S corporation is when you have, mathematically, it's when it's around 50K of net profit. But as we'll talk about in a few minutes, like, there are administrative headaches to being an S corp. So yes, you can jump right into it at around 40, 50K because it'll start to save you money, but you still have administrative costs. So you're saving maybe like $5,000 in taxes, but you're probably going to give $2,000 to $2,500 to an accounting firm to keep you compliant. So you're still netting ahead, but it's not necessarily as much as you think for the new headaches that you're going to have. So that's why now people are like, well, maybe I'll wait till I'm $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. Then it's a no-brainer because, again, you're going to save the taxes and you're going to, the amount that you'll save is significantly more than the administrative headache because administrative costs are going to be pretty fixed. Because you're going to need to pay for a payroll provider. Those are going to be like $40 to $80 a month. Like, we are big fans of Gusto Payroll because I feel like after the initial setup, which our team helps you with and a lot of accounting firms can help you with, it's really user-friendly. Like, we have clients that don't necessarily consider themselves financially savvy. They're up and running their own payroll, adding team members, dismissing team members. Like, it's really user-friendly.
Nice.
The other is you're going to have to fill out a business tax return. Those are going to be anywhere between like $800 and $2,000 per return, depending on the firm. And then there's just like an annoying way that you need to reimburse yourself called the accountable plan. It's the same thing you're doing when you're a non-S Corp, just the IRS wants you to do it each month. Because the IRS, maybe I should take a step back. For people who don't know what an S corporation is, you're essentially becoming an employee of your own business. So you need to treat it that way. So what an S corporation is really doing, there's really two things that you can do for saving taxes. You can defer taxes, which is essentially like a 401k. Most people know like their 401k, they put the money in, they get a tax deduction today. When they retire in 30, 40 years, they're going to pay the tax on whatever that money grew to. So you're just deferring it, you're kicking it down the road, which can certainly save you taxes because if you're making a ton of money now and then you're going to retire and make less, in theory, your bracket drops. That's the other way. The better way is legal tax avoidance. And an S corporation legally, permanently avoids a tax. And that's because we're getting hit with three taxes, like we talked about before. It's the federal, the state, and the self-employment. The S corporation specifically attacks the self-employment taxes and reduces it. So rather than paying, so if you make 100K of net profit, rather than paying 100K is getting hit with that 15.3%, it's only on the amount that you have to pay in W-2 wages. So in that scenario, maybe it's 40 or 50,000 is your W-2 wages. So you just reduced your self-employment tax liability from 15,000 down to like 7,500. And that's a permanent savings. You didn't defer it. So that's why people are always encouraged to, or I shouldn't say always, they're often encouraged when their net profit gets to a certain level that they move over to the S corporation.
Yeah, and that would be W-2 wages essentially paid out to each employee or even to like you. So let's say, for example, I'm running a business and I'm the only person in the business. And it's like, hey, I don't even have a team. I'm making $100,000 a year. Do I S-Corp and then pay myself? And then what do I do with this other? So I'm interested to hear kind of like, I guess, you talked about the LLC and the S-Corp difference and when it starts to kind of make sense from a net profit. But like, talk to me and break down like from a structural standpoint, like the differences in those things and then how that could potentially advantage you moving forward.
So the other portion of the money. So in that scenario, let's say it's a 50-50 split, just to make the math simple. The first 50,000 is going to be your W-2 wages, and that's going to get hit with the federal, state, everything. If you're using like a Gusto payroll, they're going to do the withholding, send the withholding of your self-employment taxes to the IRS. Then the other component, the other 50,000, that's going to be what's called like an owner's draw or owner's distributions. And those, you can just take them out of your business whenever you want. So like if each month, just as a hypothetical scenario, like if your 10K profit every month, you could take 5,000 through your W-2 through Gusto and then just pull the other 5 through just a regular bank transfer. But the advantage is that other distribution side is completely avoiding the taxation of self-employment taxes. So that's the advantage of that's the reason people want to be an S-Corp.
Cool. And even,
but the challenge with being an S-Corp, or sorry, to get back. Typically, yeah, most business owners that are, at least that start with us because it's just them, or maybe they have some like vendors like that are contractors, but yeah, like they're the only employee of the business. And that's where it gets confusing to people because the IRS treats you like you're an employee. So like a quote unquote, a real employee. So for example, when you're doing your home office reimbursement, they don't want you to reimburse yourself at the end of the year because if it was a real employee, they wouldn't be okay with them spending money and you giving them the money back 12 months later. Like a normal employee would be like, all right, I spent the money, reimburse me each month. And so that's why the IRS is like, we expect you to do this within 60 days because that's realistic of like a real business employee relationship. And so that's one of the things that clients can find to be irritating. Like on our side, like we're requesting every month, like do your accountable plan. That can be very annoying to people. And that's why when you're ready to go into the S corporation, highly encourage you also have the funds for professional bookkeeping because there is the things that we're talking about, like you don't want to have to remember it. It's also time consuming, but more importantly, the bookkeeping needs to be done a certain way when you're integrating payroll. And so some bookkeepers know how to do S corporation bookkeeping, some don't. And doing it yourself can be very tricky as well. So again, it's not a plug for us. Like just make sure you factor that in when you're ready to become an S corporation because you do want to be making enough money that a lot of this can just be outsourced. And so you save the taxes, you pay the accounting team, and then you're off to the races. Because what mistakes I see people make with the S corporations are they hear that it's the better way to go for taxes. And so it's very simple to become an S corporation. It's like basically sending one form to the IRS. The hard part is doing all the other things. Like people will come to us like they've never run a payroll and they've been an S corp for years. Like that's a huge audit risk. Firstly, didn't mention it before, switching to an S corporation is significantly less audit risk than being a non-S corporation. They're audited 15 times less than a regular business owner. And so that's other than saving taxes, that's a perk as well. But if I could give a little strategy with the LLC, because this is where it can potentially get confusing. So you do not need the LLC to save taxes, but you potentially want to consider it because the term that I like is it's S corporation insurance, because you can retroactively elect to be an S corporation. So let's say a business owner in December was like, all right, I built my LLC and I don't know if I should be an S corporation. If we were talking to them, we would say, well, what's your net profit? And like, well, last year I made 50. I don't know what I'm going to make this year. So we're like, all right, let's hold off on being an S corporation. Let's say in June they come back to us and say, all right, my business is going to make 200 this year now. Like we're really doing much better than last year. Now it's a no-brainer to be an S corporation. Because their LLC started before the start of this year, I can retroactively start their S corporation to 1/1/26. And so for the whole year, they'll be an S corporation. Where it gets tricky is if that same scenario happens, but they didn't build the LLC, they come to us in June and they're like, all right, now I want to be an S corporation. They go get the LLC. I can only start their S corporation to the birthday of their LLC. So that's what gets a little bit tricky for people, is because now you're stuck in a situation where it's like, well, you're going to be filing 2 different tax returns for your business in 2026 if you don't have that LLC. So there is a decision to be made for the clients that live in like Nevada, California, where like they're very expensive LLC states. Like Nevada doesn't have state tax, but they charge, I think, like $360 or so per year to keep your LLC running. I think in Florida it's much lower. I think it's 75 or lower. So like depending on the state you live in, that's part of the equation. But you'll need that base level LLC to level up into an S corporation at some point.
Yeah, that's interesting too, that you can essentially like travel back in time and then get that tax advantage for that 6 months that you decided it wasn't just solely on launching the LLC and having that kind of on file to be able to move. So tell me a bit too, like you guys said that you do a lot of tax stuff for content creators or people that work on the online space. And I think a lot of that kind of makes sense, business owners, LLC and those types of things. But let's talk more broadly. I think I may have mentioned it before that I fly planes in the Coast Guard's kind of what I'll call my day job, although I feel like this job tends to dominate a lot of my day as well. But something that I'm super passionate about, obviously. But talk to me about like, hey, how could you help somebody who was just your average Joe? Maybe they're flying for Southwest Airlines. Maybe they're a active duty military member. I know that you talked about knowing George Matthews, so shout out to him. Interesting that you guys that are work together as well. But like, hey, you've got somebody who is this and is filling this demographic of person. Like, how could you guys help them, and what are some common pitfalls that you see with them from, I'll say, like outside of the business scope, so that you could essentially help them be more tax advantaged? Because you talk about people that make a lot of money and are jumping in brackets. The commercial aviation world is unreal. I mean, you'll see somebody that worked for a year and for Southwest, and they made $400,000 or $500,000 in a year, and it's like, well, if you're paying taxes on that much money, you're probably missing out on a whole lot of potential benefits, whether you launch, I don't know, an LLC and sell socks out of your garage or something like that to help be a little bit more advantaged, or an S-Corp. I don't know exactly how to do it, which is kind of why I have you on here, to be able to talk through some of these ways that people can kind of optimize not only in their business life, but also in their personal life as well. So let me know if that makes any sense or if I need to clarify any of that.
Absolutely. So for the W-2 earners, there's 2 ways to look at it, because one of the big things that W-2 earners are going to need to take advantage of are retirement plans, because that is a way to directly lower what is on your W-2. So working with your employer to max out whatever that plan is. And so there's the other component of that is to really understand which tax bracket you're in, because the pilot who is making $400,000 or $500,000 a year, most likely they're going to want, well, I guess it also depends if they're married or single, because the tax bracket will move dramatically if they're married versus single. Assuming they're already starting to hit the 30% plus tax brackets, they're going to likely want to use a pre-tax 401k so that they can do their best to chip away at that income. And then conversely, if they're just newer in their career and they're much lower on the pay scale at the moment, I would talk to their HR about having their 401k be a Roth post-tax one. Because right now in this tax code, that's part of the math we're doing for business owners that are on the lower end of the financial scale at the moment, because we have no clue what tax rates are going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah. Pat,
so
let me
if you're making,
too. Tell me, like, I know this may sound like a silly question, but I feel like there's still people out that may not know. Like, tell me, what's the difference between Roth? What's the difference between traditional? And then, where, I'm sure you're going to get to this as well, like, where does the kind of tipping point occur when you talk like S-Corp wise LLC? You said, hey, around the $50,000 net profit amount. Based on the math that you guys have seen traditionally, like, where does this tipping point lie, and how you kind of decide to plan for what you're going to be doing? Because I think it's really important to kind of understand the distinctions between the two, so you kind of set yourself up for success. So go into that too, and I know that you'll probably end up getting into some other facets of that as well.
Totally. So for retirement plans, you can have a post-tax retirement account, meaning you've paid the tax and you put it in. That's what the Roth is. So think about the retirement plans. Like, there's three components. There is when you put the money in while it's growing, and then when you pull the money out. And so inside of a Roth, on the way in, you pay the tax. So it's post-tax. It grows tax-free. The middle one's going to be the same for all the retirement accounts. It grows tax-free. You're really just figuring out where's the taxes paid, on the front end or on the back end. So on the Roth, you pay it on the front, and then it grows tax-free. And once you're over age 59 and a half, you can pull it out tax-free. A traditional is flipped. You get a tax deduction on the way in. It grows tax-free. And then on the way out, you pay all the tax. So the decision that you're going to want to make on which one to use is going to be, one, what your income bracket is today, because the last dollar is where your tax savings hits. So if you're already maxing out and you're at the 37% tax bracket, then you're most likely going to want the traditional ones that are pre-tax, because it's going to lower your tax bill. And then you might retire and have no more income coming in, and then it's going to be cheaper. It's also going to matter where you live, because this math doesn't work as great for people in California, New York, New Jersey, if they're like, well, I want to take the Roth side, because maybe their federal isn't so high, but while they're living in those really high tax states, the math is totally different than our clients in Nevada and Florida, where they don't have to worry about any of the state side. It's zero. But it's a little bit of an art more than a science, because if you're in the middle, like let's say you're in the 24% bracket, approaching 32% bracket, you kind of have a decision to make. And that's almost more of like a political bend, because you're like, do I think the tax rate now at 24% is worth me paying, because I worry in 30 years it's going to be significantly higher?
Yeah. And what income is that person
going to
be at around? Like, hey, this person who's kind of sitting in the middle who's going to have this decision, they're making what, $150,000 a year, W-2? Like, what's the numbers look like?
If they're single, it's between 100 and 200 essentially.
Okay.
So, and if they're married, let me pull it up real quick. If they're married, then it's much bigger. Then it's basically between 200 and 400. Okay. So big tax tip, just get married. Just kidding. But yeah. But so that's always going to be the thing to consider, is where you're worried the tax rates will go. So like right now, to give you an example, I don't know how old your audience is, but some of them might remember, because it wasn't that long ago, in 1981. So right now, if you were in a 35% tax bracket, that same tax bracket in 1981 was 70%. Now it's 35. So if you're in the 35% tax bracket, you might be like, well, that's really high. I don't want to pay the tax. It was only 4 decades ago when that same tax was double. So that's sort of what I try to just remind people when we're making that final decision. It's like, what do you think the brackets will be when you actually hit retirement? And the answer is we don't know. But like obviously right now, Trump's talking about getting rid of income taxes completely and letting us rely on tariffs. If that's the case, I'm curious what the rules would be, because I would imagine we're going to see massive rollovers out of 401ks and IRAs if there's no tax for a year or whatever. But again, who knows what the rules would be if that ends up passing. But that's sort of the math when you're in the middle, is trying to figure out, should I just bite the bullet today and pay the tax? And now it's sitting in a vehicle that's completely tax-free. And so I'm a big fan of the Roth side, because depending on what you're trying to do. So I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Thiel. I don't know if I'm saying his last name, Peter Thiel.
Yeah.
He was like part of the PayPal mafia.
Yeah.
He made big headlines by showing the world how awesome Roths are, because he invested when Zuckerberg was going for his first round of money. Peter Thiel put $500,000 into Facebook via his Roth IRA. So at one point, his Roth moved to, I think, like $5 or $6 billion. And when people found out, and they're like, oh, and he'll never pay a penny of tax on that growth from 500,000 to 5 billion, Congress was upset. They're like, we should change this rule. Thankfully, it got killed. And like, I forget, I think it was the Build Back Better that was supposed to, and got killed, but that would have dramatically changed how we can do Roths. But I say that to let people realize, like, the advantage of the Roth, if you're doing investments that have high risk, high return, that's the vehicle you want to do them in. So if anyone out there is like, I love my crypto, I think it's going to the moon, you don't want to do that in a brokerage account where you put $100,000 in and it goes to 10 million. You're going to pay tax on that entire amount. But if that same scenario, if you can put $100,000 in a Roth, do that high risk, high reward investment, if it goes to 10 million in retirement, that's a tax-free asset you have.
That's so interesting.
So
I did not know that
you're going to end up with different.
With the Roth thing, that's something that I definitely had no idea. Like envisioning that high risk, high reward, or maybe my uncle's super into silver. He's like, oh, dude, you got to invest in silver, and maybe it's like kind of foreign to a lot of people, or maybe seems like antiquated or whatever. But like he's like, oh, just invest in silver, and some people are saying that, or crypto, or what was the art that was going off for a while, the digital art like kind of thing that people were super into. I mean, it starts to become like what that vessel is, and it's that's news to me, that you could take money that's in a Roth IRA and invest in something like that, and then when you're pulling out, if it's a 10x growth or return like that, like that's a huge amount that you're going to be saving yourself when you decide to stop working.
Especially with crypto, if some of your audience are moving in and out of positions, you don't have to stop and pay taxes if you have a great year, bad year, great year, bad year, or they're just chipping away and just taking profit after profit after profit. If they're good at day trading it, a Roth doesn't have any capital gains to worry about. But to go deeper into that, one of the pushback, I don't know the average age of your audience, but the big pushback to retirement planning for younger people is that the money is quote unquote locked up. And that's potentially true. You can't, like, if you're doing your best to like limit the amount of money that comes to your pocket and you're maxing out your retirement accounts, yeah, you can't touch that money without penalties and interest for like to go on vacation. You can't use it for that. But retirement vehicles can invest in everything other than three things. They cannot invest in collections or collectibles. So like no wine, no fine art, no collector cars. It cannot invest in insurance policies. And the last one, it cannot invest in an S corporation, which that one is an S corporation rule, just because it can't be owned by non-humans essentially. But that's not an issue, because if you were about to invest in a company and they were an S corporation, they could remove their S election and become a partnership or a C corporation. Like publicly traded companies are C corporations, so like those are allowed. But to get back to the reason why people shouldn't feel so trapped inside of a retirement account is exactly what we're just talking about. Like if you are a real estate investor, you can have your 401k or your Roth IRA go buy a building. You can have, like, I was at an event where there was a retired pilot that was buying a chartered private plane from his former employer because he knew, like, this might resonate with your audience. I didn't know what he was talking about because this has some sort of chartered certification that's hard to get. So to him, that was a very valuable asset, but he was going to have his 401k buy like a $3 million plane that he was going to charter. So for him, that was a great investment. For someone like me who knows nothing about that space, that'd be extremely high risk and I wouldn't know what I was doing. But for him, it was low risk and high return because that's his area of expertise.
Yeah.
But his 401k is allowed to do that.
And what would that look like? So let's say, I've been fortunate, and I guess somewhat fortunate, somewhat unfortunate. I bought into the housing market in 2021 where the rates were super good, but I paid an inflated price for the home that I bought. And now I feel like I'm kind of married to the house, right? And I just found out I probably have to redo my roof, which is going to be a pain in the ass. So actually, we could use me as an example for this. You can't invest in, what did we say, collectibles, and I forget what the other thing was, but
insurance and S-Corps.
Insurance, yeah, perfect. So if I have to do a roof job to my house over in California, is that something that I could take my 401k or Roth and then pay into that because I know that asset, that's something that I want to keep. And that's something that I want to continue to have and continue to grow. And then talk to me about kind of like implications of that, and then ways that you've seen people utilize that in a more advantaged way, whether that's with tax or retirement.
So when you decide to do self-directing, it's a great tool, but it has a lot of annoying rules. So one of the rules is that there's certain people that you cannot do transactions with, and yourself being one of them. So in that specific scenario, your rental property said it's in California?
Correct. Yeah.
So in that specific scenario, your retirement account couldn't get involved because it'd be doing business with you. If that same scenario was like in 2021 and you were about to make that transaction with a third party, like if it was a stranger, then yes, your 401k could go out and buy that for you. And then the 401k money would make the repairs and things like that. So the short answer is you can do it. In that specific example, you couldn't because you personally already own it. So you're not allowed to do a deal with yourself essentially inside of these plans. But if you're doing it from the start, and that's one of the things I try to remind people, like they want to, like, because if they have passions for buying businesses, like if their friend owns a gym and they need an investor, your 401k could be the investor. Now, there are certain rules you have to pay attention to because you couldn't necessarily get any like special treatment at that gym because then there's violations of rules and things like that. But in general, the money isn't as locked up as people think if the majority of what they want to spend it on is business and investing.
So what's the risk? So let's take that exact example, right? Let's say I live out here in Florida now, and it will use me. This is great. This will be like a free consult. I dig it. I'm interested in buying a commercial property so that I can launch an in-person business space. I want to buy it because I hate paying rent because I want to pay down some principal, and I want to be able to kind of own the commercial space and then potentially rent that out in the future somewhere. So I'm like, hey, I found this property. Let's say, for example, it's $1 million, and I want to utilize my 401k to help me, make an investment into this property. Like, what does that look like? How would somebody go about doing that? And then what are some of these rules that you're talking about that I'd have to be paying attention to? So because nobody, I'll say nobody, not a lot of people in the general population have $1 million so they can just shit out and then go and buy a property that they want. So how would you, Pat, kind of attack attack the problem so that it's one, tax advantage, and two, reduces the risk as much as possible so that you're positioning somebody in a good spot, I guess.
So in that scenario, there would be really two avenues that you'd have to take, because if it's your gym, you wouldn't be able to do it because you couldn't put your gym inside of your 401k's real estate. So when you do self-directing and you went out and buy something, like you go buy a property, it needs to be a hands-off investment. So think about it similar to be like if your 401k or your Roth IRA buys Amazon stock. You're not doing anything. You're just a shareholder. You make no decisions. You can't call Bezos and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do with this new warehouse. When it would be the same thing if you bought a gym, it would need to be rented by a third party and operated, and you wouldn't even be able to go in and do maintenance. If you're a handy guy, you can't go in there and do maintenance. Like your 401k you have to hire managers and things like that. Like you're not allowed to benefit the property by being you. So that's some of the restrictions that can be a little overwhelming for people in the beginning, but it's great for people who are like, I'm a real estate person and I'm going to buy out of state. And I always hire managers because I'm just investing. Like I don't want to be, working on the plumbing and stuff like that. If you're buying local and you are very handy and you increase your profit margins because you're handy, then you would have to do those outside of retirement vehicles. But to get it back to your specific scenario, if you're going to go buy a building, so there'll be a couple ways that you could go about that to run your own gym in it. There is a tax strategy there too. Again, you would have to buy the building in an LLC or your personal name, something like that, just outside of retirement vehicles. And then you can do what's called self-rental rule. So you can take your operational business can pay the rent to yourself. And what's nice about that is usually you end up with a net loss on the real estate side. And if you've done that strategy properly and completely merged the two, or group the two is the IRS term, then the losses of that rental property can swing around and lower the net profits of the operational gym. So you can use those two would be how that scenario for yourself would be tax favorable. If it's a stranger, like you just buy the gym and you're going to get a stranger to put their gym operations into it, then your 401k is back in the business.
Okay.
And then potentially a little bit of a marrying the two. Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say the thought being like maybe I had somebody else who I believed in their ability to run a gym or do whatever, and I bought the space and it was like, yep, Pat's going to open up a gym over in Vegas. I see this commercial space and I'm like, yep, I'm going to use my 401k to buy the commercial space. And then Pat is going to now rent the commercial space from me. And then he's going to own and operate his own gym out of there. And I'm essentially just profiting or utilizing the income from the rental in that way. And I think that's more advantageous than having the money in the retirement account. Is that kind of jiving?
Yep. Yeah. Your 401k is his landlord.
Interesting. Now, why is that beneficial? So talk to me about that a little bit too. And I know we're kind of getting down the rabbit hole of this scenario, but like if I'm somebody who wants to do something like that and I want to invest in real estate outside or whatever, like people talk about, 401k or Roth IRA growth. Why would it be more advantageous for me to invest in that real estate then versus leaving it in that account? And what's the belief of what you think the market is probably going to do likely ends up coming into play?
So the most basic answer I would give is that the highest rate of return you're likely going to get with the lowest risk is to invest in things that are specifically your area of expertise. So if someone has no idea how to do real estate, I would say this is the worst idea for them because they'll lose money. But there's people out there like real estate is their skill set, but they happen to have retirement vehicles too. So it just makes sense for them to use other dollars to get the rate of return they're getting in their non-retirement vehicles. That same thing I was referring to, like that guy I met who was buying a plane. That would be a terrible idea for most of the population. But if you're a retired pilot who specifically knows the quality of that plane, that's a much different risk profile. So the advantage of like the self-directing world is it allows people to build their retirement vehicles in things they know. Like Peter Thiel, he was pretty confident that he had like a good company that he was investing in. $500,000 into a venture company could be extremely risky. In his scenario, it was probably less risk because he knew what he was looking at being a tech guy. So that's the advantage of self-directing. It allows you to do what you're doing in your area of expertise. So like in your scenario, or for some of your audience, like if their expertise is understanding like who's a good gym operator because they are friends with them and they're a good gym operator too, or whatever the case may be, they might be able like, all right, all this guy needs is a building. My 401k can buy that building. And I think he's going to make his payments because he knows what he's doing to fill up a gym. So that's the scenario where I would say it's a good investment because it's your area of expertise. If it's not your area of expertise, like again, like getting back to crypto, if someone has no idea what they're doing in crypto, I wouldn't say, well, use your 401k. Then that eliminates the risk. It's just a way to get a tax favorable growth of wealth outside of just like Wall Street tells you don't do anything in your 401k other than stocks and bonds and mutual funds. But the reality is the IRS says you could do whatever you want in here other than these three things. So typically you can grow them faster using your skill sets.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it's almost individualized in that way. I'm thinking too, like somebody who, let's say a day trader wants to do it, and this is probably a poor example, but when Dogecoin took off, I'm sure you were probably still doing the same job that you're doing. Let's say somebody was like, oh, dude, I want to put my entire, call it $100,000 Roth IRA into Dogecoin. And then like the next day when it went to the moon, are they able to cash that out like right away and then just be like, hey, day traded and fucking we just went from this to this and now this is all retirement tax advantage and I'm chilling. I don't have to work a single day in my life now at this point when I hit retirement age. Or I mean, potentially you could even pull it out early and just get hit with all your penalties and then be done on the spot.
Yeah, you answered it right there. Like they can cash out and move to cash inside the Roth. They can't bring it across the threshold into their personal bank account without getting hit with taxes and early withdrawal fees. So, but if they're willing to just hold until they're over age 60, then the whole thing is tax free. So crazy. That is what is a frustration for some people. If they're like, well, if they made a ton of money, like literally like the crypto millionaires and billionaires, then they're just going to have to figure out if the taxes and the penalties are worth it. And, you know, if you make multi 7 or 8 figures, maybe it is just pay the tax and bring the money over and enjoy your life. But most people, they're just rolling that money into their 60s. But that huge new pot of money, again, it doesn't have to be limited to just that one asset class. But yeah, from a day trader's perspective, they can just keep taking profits and not being slowed down by the drag of taxes.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, what a wild world we live in, where people.
And the same is true for the. Yeah, this strategy. The reason I like talking about it is because this strategy is very rarely talked about because there's too much money being made to convince people to never leave the stock market. Like Wall Street doesn't. Like Wall Street will tell you that you can't self-direct, but it's basically it's a little misleading how they'll say it. It would be like walking into Taco Bell and be like, I want a Big Mac. And they're like, you can't get that. It's like, well, you can't get it here, but you can get a Big Mac. And it's the same thing with like, you walk into Fidelity, Schwab, any of these companies, like we work off of Schwab, but we help our clients do whatever they want with their investments. But like you walk into Schwab or Fidelity or any of these guys and say, hey, I want to buy a piece of real estate with my IRA. They're going to say you can't do that. And most people think that means it's not allowed. It's like, it's not allowed there. And depending on who your advisor is, they might not be contractually allowed to even talk to you about that, because there's I don't know if it's a legal term, but I think it's in a lot of their employment contracts that it's illegal for them to sell away from the company. So they're not allowed to give you advice that, even though it might benefit you, if it means you take your $1 million out of their institution and move it into real estate. Like they can't even talk to you about that because it's selling away and it's a breach of their contract.
So interesting. Yeah, I feel like that's something to kind of take note of, right? Like, I even have people that kind of help me with those types of things too, and it's not something that I understood until we just chatted today about how you could, potentially do something like that, whether you're a satellite owner or operator, or what that kind of looks like for you. And here's a question for you too. Let's say that one person, you went out and you bought a gym space, and I know that there's dynamic shifts of commercial real estate, just from like discussions with people every 5 years or so, they kind of adjust rates. So I know actually probably now, this year and next year, there will probably be a lot of commercial spaces that are going to come up for sale because the rates have jumped so much. Somebody bought into a commercial space and they bought in at 3% in 2021. And now the rate is about to be 7% on $1 million or whatever. And that's going to be a huge amount. And unless their business is trending that direction, it could be really tough for them to be able to make their payments and keep it. So maybe they'll be forced to sell. So my question for you now is like, hey, if I'm somebody who is forced to sell after I bought this property, if that sale goes in there, am I going to get smoked with capital gains or whatever? And is that going to stay within that raw space if I ended up buying that in there? And then what are some of the kind of advantages and disadvantages of that? And then I'll let you go after that, because that's probably a convoluted question.
So in that hypothetical scenario, you're saying your Roth IRA bought a commercial property with a gym in it, and now you're forced to sell it at a gain or at a loss?
Let's analyze both. Let's say like, hey, I bought it for $1 million and I can't make my payments anymore, but now maybe it's worth like 1.2, and I'm gonna sell it, and then that's gonna go into this account, and then tell me what would happen if I ended up losing money off of it, and I'm selling for 800 grand just to keep the math easy, and then now you're in a position where all of that is, I'm sure, affecting your Roth in some way, whether it's just money straight going into that or not. I guess I'm interested in how that would look.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. So if you talk to people who will say don't buy rental properties in retirement vehicles because you lose out on the tax advantages. So again, I'm not saying that there's tax advantages compared to regular, but I'm talking about the argument being made from, you're someone who's really good at real estate and you have both regular money in cash and also retirement money. It makes sense to do it in both areas because that's your expertise. But to your point, inside of a retirement vehicle, just like you get all the advantages if that $1 million building goes to 1.2 and you sell it, there's no tax. The downside is, let's say God forbid it goes to 0 and you take a full $1 million loss, there's no write-offs in an IRA because there's no tax at all. So when you lose inside of a retirement vehicle, there's no benefit to you personally. You don't like swing that $1 million into losses on your personal tax return, but it cuts both ways. If you sold that $1 million building for 10 million, no tax, but the losses are not there either. I'll bring up another thing that I don't know. The other advantage of real estate is that, or not advantage, but what people overlook is you don't have to have all the cash. You can actually get loans inside of 401ks and IRAs as well. They're called non-recourse loans. So you have to work with a specific bank who really knows, like, they need to do this day in and day out because they can accidentally send you down the wrong path. But non-recourse loans are really nice. Again, you can lever your 401k in real estate. Again, I'm not recommending leveraging for margin or anything like that, but specifically if you're a real estate person interested in this, a non-recourse loan, it is 100% allocated to the property, 0% you. So like there's not credit checks. You're personally not involved in that loan at all. That's why typically they're going to need you to have 30 or 40% down, because their only collateral is that actual property. There's nothing they can do to you personally. But for anyone listening who's like, yeah, I do want to buy that $1 million building and put a gym in it, or with like someone else's gym in it, but I only have $500,000, they can get it done with a non-recourse lender.
Interesting. Man, I feel like I could talk about this stuff all day with you. I know that I promised you an hour and we were already over that a little bit. So I just want to say thanks again, Pat, for coming on, talking about all things, money, and for whether you're a small business owner or, for our audience being like aviators and people that are interested in doing other things, just kind of leveling up their financial, I guess, prowess and knowledge, and having another tool or potentially another person kind of in their referral network that could help. So give me a quick and dirty. I'll end up leaving all your stuff in the show notes as well. But where can people find you? How can they get in contact with you? What would you recommend for doing that as well? If they're like, hey man, a lot of this stuff this guy's saying resonates. He's a straight shooter, and then we'll be able to put that stuff kind of in there to help people locate you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm on Instagram at the Pat Darby. My podcast is Build Your Wealth Muscle. And then info at Sin City CFO. You can reach out to me directly if you have any questions. Yeah, happy to help anyway. Especially like, I don't know if we want to do another episode at some point if you want, like, because the self-directing is like its whole big thing, and the industry as a whole discourages people from doing that with their money. And that might be a really helpful avenue for people who are W-2 and they might be building up these huge 401ks that they feel like they're stuck with just stocks and bonds.
Yeah, that'd be great to pencil something in, man. Thank you again for coming on. I'll leave all of this stuff in there again. And just so all you guys remember, because I feel like I don't do it enough, don't be a lazy ass. Drop us a review, a 5-star, please. It helps the show grow, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're kind of getting your podcasts. We appreciate you guys for sticking around. And thanks again, Pat. And remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. We'll see you guys next time. Later.